The castle always seemed like a sleeping animal to me, a stone monster perched atop the hill, indifferent to the cold that bit the skin of those living below. In the morning, when the sun was still just a timid stain behind the heavy clouds, I would always look at those pointed towers as I walked to the river. Perhaps it was masochism. Perhaps it was foolish hope. But I always thought, does anyone inside know that we are freezing out here? Today, however, something felt different, as if the air were suspended, tense. I didn't know that, at that very moment, the Alpha King was receiving false reports about us, his people. I didn't know that his steel eyes were scanning maps while he listened to sweet and dangerous lies from Malcor's mouth. I didn't know he was slamming his fist on the table with contained frustration. All of this I would only discover later. In that moment, all I knew was that my hands ached. The river water was an icy blade cutting my skin, burning my joints. I scrubbed the sheets, hard as tree bark, feeling the fabric tear my already wounded palm. Every splash seemed to bite, and yet I continued, because if I didn't wash them, I wouldn't receive the day's paltry payment. And if I didn't receive it, Elian wouldn't eat. My brother was light and fragility in one form, a boy who had never managed to shift, and was therefore treated as if he were contaminated. I had always carried his burden on my shoulders, and proudly. He was the only person in the world who reminded me that there was good in me. With every scrub, the cold traveled up my arms, cracking my bones, scrambling my thoughts, until I felt blood trickling between my fingers. I just took a deep breath, ignoring the pain, and continued. The metallic scent mixed with the odor of cheap soap, and I felt like closing my eyes and pretending I was somewhere else. Behind me, the voices of the other Omegas echoed. Tired murmurs, coughs, shuffling footsteps. The wind carried a smell of damp wood and distant smoke. The entire kingdom reeked of decay. The throne was empty, they said. Not because the king wasn't there, but because he didn't see, didn't feel, didn't touch the truth. But a part of me wanted to believe that this would change one day. I just didn't imagine it would be today. My hands were already throbbing like burning coals when I heard the heavy sound of boots behind me. I recognized that dry rhythm. Malcor. I felt my stomach clench as if I were about to be punched. He stopped beside me. His scent always made me nauseous. Expensive perfume mixed with moral decay. "Hadria," he murmured, with that unctuous voice. "Your family's debt has increased." My body froze harder than the river. "How has it increased?" I paid yesterday. The rates have changed. New fees. Taxes for river use. Taxes on what? My voice came out low, but firm. He smiled. It was striking how cruel a smile could be. Administrative matters. You wouldn't understand. But you must pay. Or else. There was always an or else, and it was never good. I felt my ribs tighten against my lungs, as if my own body refused to breathe. "I'll find a way," I whispered. "You always do." He walked away, satisfied. When Malcor disappeared, my legs finally trembled. I knew what that meant. Hunger. Another day. Maybe 2. Maybe 3. I returned home as the sky was darkening. The air smelled of cold stone and impending snow. Elian was waiting for me, sitting near the small fire, his thin hands holding an old book. "Did you eat, Dree?" he asked with those eyes that always undid me. I lied, as always. Yes, I ate at work. He smiled, happy and naive. My heart ached. After I put him to sleep, my stomach still empty and a dull fear growing inside my chest, I walked to the stable. The smell of old hay, manure, and mold enveloped me. I was tired and desperate. Perhaps that's why I didn't immediately notice the figure slumped in the corner. A body, trembling, shallow breathing, almost odorless. Except for something strange, which I couldn't identify at the time. I just took a step forward, and that beggar raised his eyes to me, eyes of steel. His eyes were impossible to ignore. Even in the dim stable light, even covered by dirty, tangled strands of hair, they had that color of wet steel that I had only seen in 2 places in my life, in the guards' swords and on nights when a storm is approaching. A different kind of chill ran through my body. It wasn't fear, it was recognition, but it didn't make sense. A beggar couldn't have that kind of gaze, nor that posture, even hunched as if his spine couldn't bear the weight of his own body. When I took another step, his scent approached. It wasn't the heavy, acidic smell of common beggars, those who slept near the walls. It was something cleaner, deeper, but faint, as if muffled, as if that weakness were a poorly sewn disguise. "Hey," I whispered, kneeling beside him. "Are you breathing?" He tried to lift his head and failed. "Just cold," he murmured, his voice too hoarse for the age he appeared to be. It wasn't the hoarseness of an old man. It was that of a wolf trying to hide its own strength. "You don't need to come closer." The way he said it, so controlled, so conscious. For a second, I had the sensation that he was evaluating me, weighing my every gesture, as if I were more dangerous than him. Ridiculous. Me, dangerous? I barely had the strength to make it through the day. But that look, I couldn't ignore it. "You're trembling," I said, almost irritated. "That's not just cold. When did you last eat?" He looked away. Silence. I understood. Hunger has a particular way of shaping the body, and that man was on the edge between life and death. I sighed. I opened my cloth purse, already nearly empty. Inside it, my only piece of bread. Stale, small, a little moldy at the tip. But it was all I had saved for my dinner, the one I had pretended to Elian I'd already eaten. Hunger bit me inside. My throat tightened. My stomach roared like a caged beast. But I looked at him, and something in me decided. I broke the bread in half. The knife of pain cut through my chest, knowing I would go without eating until the next day. Maybe longer. But I held out the larger half to him. "Eat." He remained motionless, looking at me as if I had just handed him a jewel of incalculable value, or a sentence. "Why?" he asked, in a thread of a voice. "Because no one should sleep hungry. Not even you." A shadow crossed his face, as if my words had touched a place that hadn't received light in a long time. He took the bread with slow, almost reverent movements, and then I smelled it. A breath of his true scent escaped. Storm, wet stone, ozone, power. It was so quick that I almost believed I had imagined it, like a flash, a silent lightning bolt behind the wooden walls. He bit the bread carefully, and I felt a strange thing in my chest, as if my body were responding to his presence. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was a burning curiosity, but I tried to push it away. "What is your name?" I asked. A long pause. "Thomas." It was a lie. I could feel it, as if the lie had texture, thin, fragile. Even so, I accepted it. Perhaps because I myself lived on lies to protect those I loved. He looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw something break inside those eyes of steel, something almost human. "Thank you," he whispered. A simple word, but said in a way that made something shudder on my skin, as if an invisible thread had been cast between us in that instant. I stood up before the moment became too intense. "I'll come back tomorrow with more food." He reacted quickly, like a wounded animal. "Don't come back. Don't get involved with me." His voice was weak, but there was a command hidden there, an alpha trying not to sound like an alpha. My heart beat painfully against my ribs. "Too late," I replied, without looking back, and I left the stable with the strange sensation that I had just changed my destiny. The night wind enveloped me when I left the stable, carrying his scent on my skin as if something invisible had clung to me. It was impossible. A beggar couldn't leave a mark like that. But my breathing came faster, as if I had been running, as if my body had understood something that my mind still refused. The path to my hut was a trail of frozen mud and shadows. Every step deepened my fatigue a little, and my stomach burned with hunger. But for the first time in a long time, I couldn't think only of the pain of existence. His image followed me, the way he held the piece of bread, as if it were sacred. No one had ever looked at a gesture of mine that way. When I arrived home, Elian was sleeping curled up, a thread of light flickering near him. The weak flame made shadows dance on the walls. I knelt beside his bed and ran my hand through his brown hair, so similar to mine. "It's okay," I murmured, trying to convince myself. "I can take a little more. That's what Omegas do. They endure." But when I closed my eyes, I saw Thomas's eyes again. Steel, determination, hidden fury, hidden pain too. A different pain than mine, but pain nonetheless. I lay down on the floor, wrapped in a thin blanket, and sleep came slow, dragged out. I was overcome by a strange trembling, as if something in the air was changing, a bad and good premonition at the same time, half threat, half promise. I didn't know that. That same night, Vaelor, still disguised, would walk through the alleys to see the filth that his council was hiding. I didn't know he would overhear guards mocking Omega families. I didn't know he would see children rummaging through garbage while Malcor reported prosperity to the castle. And I didn't know that, for the first time in years, the Alpha King would feel guilt. I woke up before dawn with aching joints. The cold had broken through the blanket and settled inside me. The house was silent, except for Elian's soft breathing. I got up slowly, my hands throbbing even before touching the icy water of the day. But I couldn't be late. The increased debt pressed on the back of my neck like an invisible fist. As I tied my hair back haphazardly, a memory crossed my mind. Thomas's weak command, "Don't come back," and my answer, "Too late." Maybe I should have felt fear, caution, but all I felt was responsibility. He was alone, weak, with no one. It didn't matter that he was a stranger. It didn't matter that something about him seemed off. I knew what it was like to be ignored by the world. When the sun finally threatened to rise, I walked to the river again. The water seemed even colder. Every dip of my hands drew an involuntary gasp. I breathed deeply not to scream. The smell of snow was approaching. Winter was coming early that year. Terrible news for those who lived on scraps. The other women were talking around me, but I barely listened. My mind returned to the stable, to that moment when he held my hand without touching it, to the charged silence that formed between us, and then a noise behind me made me turn. Malcor. My body immediately stiffened. "Good morning, Hadria," he said, with that poisonous voice wrapped in false politeness. "I heard you left home late tonight." My hands stopped in the water. "I was taking care of the stables," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. He tilted his head, his eyes narrowed. "Be careful not to become attached to those you shouldn't. There are creatures in the stable that don't deserve your concern." I felt a shiver run down my spine. He knew, or he suspected. Malcor always sniffed out misery like a deformed wolf. "There's nothing there but rotten hay," I retorted. He smiled. "We shall see." And he walked away with slow, calculated steps, like a predator marking its territory. When I managed to breathe again, my hands were trembling in the water. I needed to see Thomas. I needed to make sure he was alive, that Malcor hadn't found him before me. As soon as I finished my shift, I went straight to the stable. The smell of hay and mold enveloped me. The corner where he was seemed even darker. "Thomas?" I called out, my heart racing. "Are you there?" Silence. I took 2 steps. The shadow moved, and then I heard his voice, hoarse, firm, despite the weakness. "I thought I told you not to come back." But the way he said it wasn't a command. It was relief. The stable had a smell that only those who live among wet hay and manure know. It was strong, almost suffocating, but that morning it seemed less bad, perhaps because something in the air had shifted, or because I was aware that he was still breathing, there, in some dark corner. When my eyes finally found his shadow, my body trembled, not from cold, but from a mixture of excitement and fear. He was leaning against the wall, shoulders hunched, hands shaking. But somehow, even in that weakness, there was power. A contained power, a latent force that made the ground beneath him seem too solid for a mere beggar. "Thomas?" My voice came out softer than I intended, almost a whisper. He slowly raised his eyes, and there they were. Steel disguised as fatigue, the wolf hidden behind human eyes. "Who?" he began, but stopped, fighting his own voice. "Who's there?" Approaching him was an instinctive decision. Every step on the wet hay was a risk. Every movement of mine could alert the guards or some invisible observer. But he was there. He needed help. The piece of bread squeezed my palm. Small, dry, almost brittle, but it was all I had to offer. The faint aroma of stale wheat mixed with sweat and the night's cold passed between my fingers, and suddenly, it didn't matter that I would go hungry afterward. Not him. He tried to speak, but choked on the cold breath. "You shouldn't. And neither should you," I retorted, ignoring the tremor that ran up my arm. "But no one should sleep hungry. Not you." It was at that instant that the world seemed to narrow around us. His scent, storm, wet stone, and something indefinable, metallic perhaps, struck my memory like silent thunder, a wolf's scent, an alpha's, but not threatening, just true. Carefully, I broke the bread in half. The makeshift knife of my finger cut the hard crust as if cutting an invisible thread between us. He watched me, eyes wide, lips trembling as if he couldn't believe the gesture. "Why?" he whispered, swallowing hard. "Because," I took a deep breath, "because it's the right thing to do. There's nothing wrong with being kind, even when everything around is rot." He approached with an almost reverent slowness. He took the half I offered with trembling hands, and I felt the strength he wasn't showing trying to hide in every gesture, as if the act of accepting my kindness was as difficult as resisting his own nature. When he bit the bread, a silent snap crossed the air. I knew, inexplicably, that moment would mark something deeper than any word could explain. The world narrowed to the point where there was only the smell of snow, the taste of stale bread, and the warmth that pulsed between us. He started again, and this time his eyes penetrated me with an intensity that made me unconsciously step back. "You are different," I laughed without humor, just a small exhale. "Different how?" He swallowed the piece of bread and took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling, revealing every muscle hidden beneath the weary flesh. "Different from everyone." His eyes shone for an instant, as if he had forgotten to disguise himself. "Honor, courage, kindness, they are rare." I remained silent. Words were not enough for him, nor for me, but the intensity in his gaze spoke volumes. It spoke of something I had never experienced before: recognition, acceptance, a kind of respect that didn't depend on wealth, title, or strength. The hay under my feet crunched when I backed away just enough to see his face better. Shadows marked the hard lines, but I suddenly realized how the apparent weakness was just a curtain over an alpha who didn't yield to the world. An alpha who could destroy everything around him, but chose not to. "Thank you," he said finally, every syllable loaded with sincerity and something more, something that burned silently between us. For the bread." I just nodded, feeling my heart clench. "Come back tomorrow. There will be more if you are alive to see it." He sighed, lifting his head slightly. I don't know if I deserve this. Maybe none of us deserve anything," I replied, my voice almost choked. "But we still do what is right." The instant his hands touched the bread, something shifted. An invisible bond formed between us, delicate, silent, yet powerful enough to break the barriers of the world outside. A bond that no lie, no mask, could erase. He looked at me as if he understood, and I felt that I had begun to realize it too, that my own soul was no longer alone. And so in that foul-smelling stable, surrounded by rotten hay and the cold that penetrated the bones, an impossible connection was born. An alliance forced by chance, but solid in essence. The beggar named Thomas was not just a needy man. He was something more, and for some reason I didn't yet understand, I wanted to continue feeding him, taking care of him, seeing that hidden strength flourish beneath the disguise. And he, somehow, seemed to need me as much as I needed him. The following days were a silent dance between us. Every morning, I brought water, bread, small portions of food I stole from the kitchen, and he accepted, as if every gesture were a sacred concession. And yet, every glance, every shared breath carried more than physical sustenance. It carried something we dared not name, something dangerous and irresistible. There were moments when Thomas allowed himself to rest beside me in the damp hay, closing his eyes with a rare confidence for someone who carried so many secrets. I felt his warmth even through his worn clothing, and the scent, storm, ozone, wet stone, mixed with my own aroma of pine and snow, forming something almost tangible. My heart beat so fast that sometimes I feared he would hear it. "Have you ever gone hungry?" I asked one morning, trying to break the silence that enveloped us. He opened his eyes, slowly, as if every word carried weight. "More times than I can count, but never with someone offering something they didn't have to." A slight smile curved his lips, timid, almost human. You are different, Hadria." The difference, I thought, was not just in the kindness he saw. It was in the recognition, in the ability to perceive honor even in the smallest actions. My body suddenly warmed, not from the cold, but from the strength of that gaze that seemed to see through every scar, every knot of fear I carried. Nights fell heavy over the stable. I watched over Thomas when fever or exhaustion struck him down. My fingers caressed his trembling hands, my palms warming his icy skin, and he sighed as if he could finally relax. Sometimes, he murmured something incomprehensible, almost poetry, as if he were speaking not only to me, but to the world he was hiding. "One day, there will be justice," he said one night, his voice hoarse. "One day, no one will have to beg or hide anymore." I held his hand firmly. "And will you be a part of it?" He looked at me, and there was something fragile, almost desperate in that moment. "I hope so." And then, with visible effort, he added, "I hope I deserve to be." Every word of his carried a weight that I felt in my bones, as if time itself had stopped within that dark, foul-smelling space. My heart twisted between compassion, desire, and the fear of giving too much of myself, because deep down, I knew that Thomas was not just a wounded man. He was an Alpha, and I was just a hungry Omega, insignificant in the eyes of the world. But in the hay, with his breath mixing with mine, no outer world existed. Only us. Only the urgency to care, to sustain, to share the little we had. It was then that I noticed the first gesture that truly took my breath away. Thomas leaned forward, approaching me as if to share a secret. His gaze was intense, charged with promise and danger. "Hadria," he murmured, "your kindness surprises me. I didn't think I would find it here." My stomach clenched. Surprise, desire, fear, all together, like a silent storm. "It's nothing," I whispered, trying to sound indifferent. "Just, you needed it." He chuckled softly, almost a purr, a strange sound coming from someone so contained, so powerful. I moved a little closer, and for an instant, everything reduced to the warmth of his body, to the silent strength he concealed, and which suddenly seemed to depend on me not to be lost. Then, the outside world invaded again, a noise of footsteps, a voice I would recognize anywhere. Malcor. My heart pounded, and Thomas got up with an almost animal impulse, his muscles tense beneath the dirty clothes. I backed away, but I couldn't run. "Hadria," Malcor's voice echoed, loaded with contempt. "What are you doing stealing food?" My body trembled. Thomas held my arm firmly, but without aggression. "Leave her alone," he said, his voice low but charged with danger. "Or you will regret it." Malcor's gaze wavered for an instant, but he composed himself, laughing sarcastically. "This beggar, he's faking it. I bet he's in cahoots with you." And then to me, "Your debt has doubled." Tears welled up before I could stop them. I had done what I thought was right, and once again, injustice fell upon me like a cold stone. Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder, and his presence was like an invisible shield. "Tomorrow, everything changes," he murmured, his steel eyes burning me with a silent promise. I didn't know that those words would be the first seed of real hope I had seen in years. The night cold seeped through the cracks in the stable, but it no longer bothered me as it had before. Now there was something warmer than the hay, than the bread itself. Thomas was there, close, breathing, and even with his shoulders hunched and the appearance of a beggar, he emanated a silent authority, a strength that made me want to protect every strand of his hair, every breath. Sitting beside him became routine, and every gesture of mine carried an almost electrical tension. When I ran my hand over the hay to set the bread, his eyes followed every movement. When I handed out the water, he tried not to touch my hands, but there was always an accidental brush, and I felt the heat of his fingers through mine. One night, the silence was broken by an unexpected question. "Hadria, have you never dreamed of something bigger than this?" He was looking at the ceiling, but his eyes, even without looking directly at me, seemed to pierce my soul. I swallowed hard. Dreams? Not anymore. Surviving was already an accomplishment, but something in his voice, in the way he asked, made me imagine possibilities. "Sometimes," I replied softly, "but dreams don't fill the belly." He chuckled, a low sound that seemed to reverberate in the cold walls of the stable. "Perhaps they don't fill it, but they can save." And then, closer to me, almost touching my arm, "And they can save someone, even without realizing it." My heart clenched, and I felt a wave of dizziness. An unknown desire mingled with fear. His every gesture was a silent warning. Every word carried the weight of a world I barely understood. In that moment, I realized something even deeper. The connection between us was not just circumstantial. It was necessity. A mutual need to exist, to resist the cruel world surrounding us, to believe in something greater than the cold, hunger, and injustice. But not everything was calm. Malcor still hovered like an invisible shadow. His footsteps echoed in my mind even when he wasn't present. With every furtive visit to the kitchen or the storage room, I felt anxiety settle in my chest. And Thomas, even hiding his true self, did not fail to notice the tension. Every time he held my hand, I felt time compress, that the world outside didn't exist, but that the storm was always lurking. Aren't you afraid? I asked one night, almost as a confession. As I adjusted his makeshift blanket, he looked at me with the intensity of a contained alpha, and for an instant, his disguise vanished. Afraid of you? A short smile curved his lips. No, you remind me that courage exists, even where no one else sees it. I felt my chest expand, a strange sensation, a mixture of pride and vulnerability. He saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. Strength, dignity, kindness. But there was no time to lose myself in daydreams. Danger still stalked us, and every moment of tenderness was charged with urgency. And then, in the quiet of the night, while holding my hand, I felt something change. A silent click in the air, an unspoken promise. Thomas, the beggar, was becoming part of something greater, and so was I. The forced alliance that life imposed on us grew into something profound, immutable, almost sacred. However, as the stable silence enveloped us, I knew that this was just the beginning. The world outside was full of eyes and lies, and Malcor would not rest. But Thomas was there, and with him, I felt that maybe, just maybe, we could resist. And so, with the bread divided, with the cold all around and Thomas's breath mixed with mine, the day that would change everything ended. A small flame of hope, a seed of trust and desire, ignited between us, in the mud and dirt of the stable, ready to face the rot of the kingdom that awaited us. The first rays of sun barely managed to penetrate the cracks in the stable, but they already brought the acrid smell of damp wood and moldy straw. Thomas was lying down, his muscles tense even in rest, and I observed him carefully. His every sigh was a note in the symphony of danger and trust we shared. "Hadria," he murmured, his voice hoarse, still between sleep and wakefulness. "We need to go out today." I got up, my body stiff from the cold and the effort of the day before. The task was simple. Accompany Thomas through the market streets, through the alleys that smelled of urine and rot, and see with my own eyes what he needed to show. But every step outside the stable seemed to risk not only our lives, but the fragile trust that had emerged between us. The streets were full of tired faces, eyes silently begging for something that didn't exist. There were children trying to sell the little they had, women carrying bags of garbage as if they were jewels, men with arms cut by hard labor, all subjugated by an invisible and cruel authority. Thomas walked beside me, disguised as a beggar, hunched, dirty, but still emanating something that others couldn't understand, a presence that demanded respect. I watched him observe every guard, every merchant, every citizen, as if noting every injustice, every theft, every disrespectful look cast upon those who had no voice. "They think everything is fine," he said softly, his voice loaded with contained anger. "But it's not. They believe Malcor's lies, and only the truth can set them free." I followed him through the market, trying not to trip over the rubble and mud accumulated in the streets. My heart pounded so hard that sometimes I feared he would hear it, but Thomas was too focused, attentive to details I could barely perceive. His every word was measured, every gesture calculated, and yet carried a humanity that made me shudder. "Hadria," he said, holding my hand for an instant. "I want you to see with your own eyes. I want you to know that the kindness you showed me is not insignificant. It can be the light this place needs." I swallowed hard. The light? Me, an oppressed servant, a hungry and discredited Omega, being called light? Warmth rose in my chest, mixed with shame and pride. And yet, I couldn't deny the truth. Thomas was right. Every gesture of compassion, every piece of bread divided, every kind word I had uttered, could mean something greater than my own survival. We reached an alley where a group of guards held Elian, my brother, who was trembling with cold and rage. My heart raced, and Thomas advanced with an agility that made me step back, but without losing the disguise. His every step was calculated, every word contained, and yet, when he touched my arm, I felt a protective warmth that made me believe nothing could separate us. "Let him go," he said, his voice low but firm, "or you will regret it." The guards backed away, suspicious, and I clung to Thomas's arm, feeling his strength under my palm. My brother was free, but fear remained, pulsing in every corner, in every shadow. When we finally moved away, Thomas looked at me intently, and for the first time, I felt that he saw me not as a servant, not as an Omega, but as someone worthy of trust, someone who could carry not just bread, but the hope of an entire kingdom. "Tomorrow, everything changes," he murmured, repeating the words that had already become a mantra in our days together. And I, despite the fear and hunger, began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could change too. In the following days, Thomas and I covered every corner of the market and alleys of the kingdom, observing the neglect, corruption, and hunger that corroded people's lives. He mentally noted every injustice, every resource deviation, every look of despair that crossed our path. Every detail was a piece of a puzzle that only he could assemble. The stench of the streets attacked me like a constant wave, but his presence made everything bearable. Even hunched, dirty, and worn by the disguise, Thomas carried an aura of contained power, a force that made me trust him without hesitation. When his hands involuntarily touched mine, to hold me, protect me, my body reacted before my mind, and I felt an electricity that I couldn't name. One afternoon, we found a small line of Omegas, waiting for rotten bread. Guards laughed, received coins, and distributed crumbs, while Malcor passed by in the distance, impassive. I felt a wave of anger and impotence rise in my chest. Elian was by my side, trying to understand why the people around seemed to accept that injustice. Thomas held me by the shoulder, diverting my gaze, and whispered, "Don't waste your energy now. Every gesture, every observation is important. All of this will be remembered." And even as he spoke, his touch made me forget the fear, the hunger, and the dirt. There was an invisible thread between us, weaving patience, trust, and a silent, burning tension. At night, back in the stable, silence enveloped us. I tended to his wounds, cleaned the dirt that the street hadn't spared, and he told me stories of a kingdom that could exist, a just kingdom, where no one would go hungry, where my brother could be valued and respected. His every word was like a fairy tale, and yet carried the promise of reality. My chest swelled with hope and fear. The proximity was almost unbearable, but there was safety in that touch, in that voice. Then, that same night, Malcor appeared unexpectedly. He watched with cold eyes what I had done. I had stolen kitchen scraps to feed Thomas. The punishment came quickly and cruelly. He increased the debt on our house. My heart clenched, and Elian was paralyzed by fear. I fell to my knees, sobbing, and felt Thomas's arms wrap around me. His scent, storm, ozone, wet stone, enveloped me, and for the first time, I felt I could trust completely, without masks. "Tomorrow, everything changes," he murmured, like a promise firmer than any royal oath. His touch, the firmness of his hand, the intensity of his eyes reminded me that something greater was at stake than fear and hunger. There was trust, honor, something that no lie of Malcor could destroy. And in that moment, even in tears, I felt that the bond between us was not merely circumstantial. It was inevitable. As he watched me, I noticed that my courage grew. Thomas taught me, without words, that kindness and strength could coexist, that my honor was not insignificant, and that even a poor Omega could be the spark that would ignite change. The night cold felt softer as we sat side by side, the world outside dissolving into shadows, but hope being born silently within me. The forced alliance had transformed into trust, and the beggar who was Thomas began to become my safe harbor, and perhaps something more dangerous, something I didn't yet dare to name. That night, the darkness seemed denser than ever. The stable smelled of urine, wet straw, and sweat. But there was a tension I couldn't ignore. Malcor was prowling. We knew he didn't forgive mistakes or mercy. Every distant noise made my muscles tighten. Every shadow seemed like a lurking traitor. Thomas sat beside me, his breathing slow and controlled. His blue steel eyes penetrated the darkness, searching for signs of danger that my human eyes couldn't perceive. "Hadria," he murmured, his voice low but firm. "Tomorrow everything changes, but now we need to survive the night." I felt my hands tremble, not from cold, but from fear and excitement. He was close, so close I could feel the warmth of his body, the smell of storm and ozone mixed with the stable dirt. My heart raced, confused between the fear of Malcor and the growing attraction to Thomas. Then, we heard heavy footsteps. Malcor appeared at the stable doorway, a cruel smile illuminating his face. "Did you think you could defy my rules?" His voice dripped contempt. "You two are playing with forces greater than you can comprehend." He advanced toward me. My body reacted before my mind, recoiling, but Thomas held my arm firmly. The security I felt in that touch was almost tangible, almost magical. "Let her go, Malcor," Thomas said, firm, his voice low and threatening, but still disguised. "Or you will suffer the consequences." Malcor laughed, a dry, cruel sound. But before he could react, Thomas stood up, revealing hidden strength even under the beggar's fragile appearance. My heart leaped. I knew, by some visceral intuition, that this man was not just an ordinary beggar. He was more, much more. I clung to his hand, and he responded to the touch, firm, protective. The tension between us was electric, almost palpable. And in that instant, I realized that the alliance born from shared bread and silent empathy had become something deeper, something no human power could separate. Malcor backed away, disconcerted by the brilliance in Thomas's eyes. I felt my own courage grow, not out of bravery, but out of trust. His presence told me we were not powerless, that even the kindness of shared bread could challenge tyranny. When we finally moved away, the night seemed less oppressive. Thomas looked at me intensely, as if trying to engrave every detail of my face into his memory. "Tomorrow," he said, repeating the mantra that had become our thread of hope. "Everything changes," and I, despite the fear and hunger, felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the world could really change, and maybe, just maybe, the kindness of a simple act could transform not just a beggar, but an entire kingdom. The morning arrived cold, with a thick mist enveloping the castle like a veil of secrecy. I could barely see the tips of my feet, and yet my senses were sharp. The smell of damp stone, moss, and newly melted snow seemed amplified, as if the whole world had condensed into that moment. Thomas was beside me, silent, observing every movement of the guards and officials, who, still stunned by the evidence of corruption he had recorded, moved cautiously, trying to maintain the routine of lies that Malcor had established. It was then that Lysandra appeared. The healer, with her long, flowing clothes, entered the stable like a calm shadow, but her presence commanded immediate respect. Her clear eyes settled on Thomas, and for the first time he straightened up, a silent response to her intuition. "He knows," Lysandra said, with a subtle reverence. "And you should know too, Hadria." My heart leaped. Her every word was a blade of reality. I already suspected something greater about Thomas, but hearing her confirm that he was not just an ordinary beggar made my chest ache. A mixture of fear, expectation, and excitement ran through my veins. "Hadria," Lysandra continued, approaching me, "you carry the blood of the Silver Manes, the lineage long believed extinct. Your blood is the only hope to protect this kingdom from the corruption that consumes its soul." I felt a chill run down my spine, mixed with the overwhelming responsibility of something I barely understood. My body trembled, not from cold, but from newly discovered weight and power. Thomas looked at me, his blue steel eyes holding my own shock and confusion, as if saying, "I knew you were more than you seemed, and now the world will see it too." As the mist dissipated, I heard the royal bell chime. The sound resonated like a call that couldn't be ignored. We were summoned to the courtyard, and every step toward the daylight increased my fear and my respect for the truth that was about to be revealed. When I arrived at the courtyard, my heart racing, I saw him, Thomas clean, powerful, imposing. The beggar I knew had disappeared, and in his place was King Vaelor, absolute authority embodied in broad shoulders, black armor, and an aura of power that seemed to bend the air around him. My body shuddered, and a mixture of anger, humiliation, and attraction overwhelmed me. "Hadria," he said, firm but without moving from the spot. "You showed more honor in one act of kindness than many in their entire lives." My mouth went dry. Anger, shock, and shame mingled. How could he make me feel small and powerful at the same time? My heart wanted to scream. My body wanted to retreat. But something inside me knew that his every word carried truth. "Malcor," he continued, his voice cutting like ice. "Your lies, your manipulations, your contempt for the weakest, everything will be exposed today." And, at that moment, the tension hanging over the entire castle seemed to focus on one point. Justice was about to be served, and I, the servant who had shared her bread, was at the center of it all. The courtyard was silent, charged with tension. All eyes turned to Malcor, who trembled more with rage than fear, realizing that his manipulation had finally come to an end. Guards lined up, keeping their distance, while Vaelor, clean and imposing, stood on the royal balcony, his blue steel eyes fixed on the traitor. I stood in the middle of the courtyard, my heart beating frantically. Every step Malcor took seemed to reverberate in my bones. There was anger, fear, and also a strange excitement that I couldn't name. My body remembered Thomas's every touch in the stables, every silent gesture of care, every word he had whispered in that dirty darkness. "Malcor," Vaelor began, his voice echoing over the courtyard, "you betrayed the kingdom's trust, diverted resources, let children starve to death, and enslaved the weakest for your own profit. Today, you will be judged in sight of everyone." Malcor laughed, a dry laugh, but it died quickly when he realized no one would intercede. He suddenly advanced, in a desperate attempt to escape, but before he could reach the gates, he grabbed my arm, raised a knife toward me. My heart stopped. The world froze for an instant. Thomas advanced, but I heard his voice, calm and firm, cutting through the chaos. "Release her, my wolf." Those words cut me deeply, awakening something I barely understood. My blood pulsed, a silver heat rising through my veins. My body expanded, grew, and an ancient, forgotten energy emerged from within me. My instinct revealed itself in the form of light. My wolf, the silver giantess of the silver manes, was reborn through me. The ground shook under the force that emanated, and Malcor screamed, the knife falling from his hand. My wolf advanced, her eyes shining with the light of my essence. He was knocked down, unable to resist the ancestral force I now embodied. Thomas, beside me, also awakened his own black wolf form, powerful and elegant, complementing my strength, protecting me from any threat. When the instant passed, I returned to my human form, breathless and vulnerable. My body glowed with the energy that still pulsed in my veins, and Thomas covered me with his royal cloak, his gaze filled with pride and contained emotion. My heart still raced, but there was something more: recognition, trust, and a bond that no disguise could erase. "Hadria," Vaelor said, now with a soft but firm voice. "You not only saved yourself, you saved the kingdom, and you showed everyone that true strength is not in the crown, but in the heart." My body still trembled. The mixture of fear, power, and adrenaline left me speechless. And for the first time, I fully understood what he had seen in that shared piece of bread in the stable: honor, kindness, and courage capable of changing destinies. The silence of the courtyard was broken only by Malcor's desperate screams. The blade fell from his hands when the presence of my silver wolf fully manifested. Every silver thread in my hair seemed to shine with the same intensity as the energy coursing through my body. I felt immense, invincible, and, paradoxically, fragile, aware that this power was a responsibility I had never asked for, but which I could now not deny. Thomas advanced beside me, partially transforming, the black wolf of his soul rising in pure majesty. Together, we were the storm that Malcor couldn't face. My body, vibrating with every pulse of my ancestral blood, pushed the villain away from us, as he screamed and tried to retreat. And then, Vaelor spoke, his voice, powerful and clear, cut through the confusion. Release her, Malcor. Your tyranny ends here. My wolf, instinctively, responded to the Alpha's command. In a precise movement, Malcor was knocked down, immobilized by the light radiating from me. Shock and fear reflected in his eyes. He finally understood that no trick or manipulation could overcome the truth, honor, and strength that now stood before everyone. When the dust and glow subsided, I returned to my human form, breathless, my heart still racing. Thomas placed the cloak over my shoulders, and his gaze met mine, filled with emotion and contained tenderness. For the first time, I felt that I was not just a servant, but someone capable of protecting, of leading, of inspiring. The courtyard was silent, the eyes of everyone present fixed on us. Vaelor approached, firm steps, each one carrying the authority of a king and the understanding of a man who had witnessed my courage. "Hadria," he said, kneeling slightly, "you have proven your honor and your power. Today, it is not only the kingdom that is saved, but also the truth of who you are." I felt a mixture of emotions overwhelm me. Anger for having been kept in ignorance, pride for having survived and won, and a spark of desire that I couldn't ignore. Thomas, or rather Vaelor, looked at me not only as a king, but as someone who knew the soul behind the servant, and this awakened something I had never imagined possible. The castle bell rang again, marking the end of the trial, the downfall of Malcor, and the beginning of a new era. I, Hadria, the Omega who had shared her last bread, was now ready to embrace not only my power, but my heart, and face what was to come beside Vaelor. After the chaos of the trial, the castle seemed to breathe again, but I still felt my body tense, my hands still trembling with the residue of the power I had released. Vaelor remained by my side, silent, his black cloak enveloping my shoulders as he led me to the royal chambers. His touch was firm, but careful, and even without words, it conveyed respect and recognition for what I had faced. "Hadria," he murmured, his voice low, loaded with something I couldn't fully decipher. "I lied to protect the kingdom, but never to deceive you." His words cut deep, my chest filled with anger, humiliation, and confusingly, desire. Why was my heart beating so fast? Why did his every gesture, every look, seem to invade my soul and ignite something I didn't want to admit? "You saw me humbled," I replied, my voice firm, loaded with pride. "And yet you cover me with your cloak as if I were fragile. Why?" He knelt, the gesture breaking the hierarchy and bringing us closer in a way that made me swallow hard. "Because I saw your honor," he said, "and it is more valuable than any throne or crown." Those words disarmed me. Years of servitude and distrust tried to convince me that I didn't deserve recognition or affection, but there he was, kneeling, recognizing my courage and kindness. My body wanted to retreat, but something inside me screamed for proximity. In the silence that followed, our eyes met, and a subtle warmth ran down my spine. Every shared breath seemed to increase the intimacy we had built in the stables. Every act of care, every word from Thomas now overflowed with meaning under Vaelor's royal cloak. "You have the choice, Hadria," he continued, now closer, his voice almost a whisper. "You can leave. You can accept wealth and freedom. But I want you to stay." My heart raced. Freedom and security were within my grasp, but staying meant more than survival. It meant fighting for Elian, for the people, and secretly, for us. My pride pushed me to speak. "I will stay," I said firmly, "but under my conditions. Elian will be protected, the poor will be respected, and no one else will suffer as we have suffered." Vaelor tilted his head, a soft, genuine smile emerging. "I accept all your conditions, my silver wolf." In that instant, under the faint light filtering through the chamber windows, I felt that something was completed. The bond was not just political or magical. It was emotional, deep, born from mutual admiration and respect. For the first time, I was not just the servant who shared her bread. I was Hadria, heir of silver, and my soul was irrevocably intertwined with his. Night fell silently over the castle, enveloping everything in long, cold shadows. But inside me, my heart burned, still caught between the tension and vulnerability of the day. Vaelor was by my side, and his familiar scent of storm and wet stone mixed with mine. Pine, snow, and the metallic touch of the ancient silver that emanated from me. It was almost palpable, a dance of opposites that recognized each other without needing words. "Are you afraid?" he whispered, his voice hoarse, loaded with tenderness. I swallowed hard, fighting the mixture of shame and desire that dominated me. "Yes," I admitted, honestly, "but I also feel something I can't explain." Vaelor moved closer, his hand gently caressing my face. His eyes, blue and deep, studied every line of my expression, every hesitation. I could feel his breath, the warmth of his presence, and my body responded, restless, pulsating with life and anticipation. "Hadria," he murmured, his voice almost a whisper that seemed to touch my own memories. There was never anything truer than what we shared in the stable, and now, nothing will ever be the same. His touch awakened something ancient in me, a memory that was not just mine, the strength of all the silver manes, the protection running through my veins. Slowly, I let my hands find his, feeling the firmness, the security, and the silent promise he offered me. The world outside disappeared. Only we existed, two hearts finally meeting without masks. He guided me to the terrace, where the full moon illuminated the royal garden, reflecting on the accumulated snow and the crystalline water of the small lake. The cold wind brought the smell of pine and wet stone, mixing with my own silver essence. "This is the moment of the bond," Vaelor said, his voice loaded with reverence. "It is not just political or symbolic. It is our soul recognizing the other." I felt a circular, pulsing energy radiating from us. I placed my hand over his, and a current of warmth and light flowed through our bodies. Our breaths synchronized, and the full moon witnessed the beginning of something that could not be measured or contained. I felt whole and vulnerable, powerful and submissive at the same time. "You don't need to fear," he whispered. "Together, nothing can destroy us." And there, under the silver light, our bond was sealed. It was not just magic or blood. It was respect, courage, and love, a bond that no disguise, no lie, or power could break. For the first time, I felt that my place was not just beside my brother or hidden in a stable. My home was the heart of the man who saw me as a queen, even when the world only saw a servant. The following morning brought the soft, warm clarity of the sun over the castle, but inside me still burned the echo of the night before. Vaelor was by my side, not as the beggar Thomas, not as the distant king, but as the man who knew my soul and my strength. "Hadria," he said, his voice firm but soft. "You gave me something no one else could. Honor, courage, and trust. I lied to protect the kingdom, but never to deceive you." My breathing quickened, but not from fear. I felt his truth. I felt the raw sincerity, and my heart finally began to calm down, yielding to what we both knew was inevitable. "You saw me humbled," I said, my voice firm, "and yet you cover me with your cloak as if I were fragile." "Why?" Vaelor approached, kneeling before me once more, but this time there was no distance or hierarchy, just us, "because I saw your honor," he said, "and it is worth more than any throne or crown." The warmth of his words penetrated my resistance. My pride fought, but my heart recognized that here was the man I could trust, whom I could love. The fear of being vulnerable still existed, but it was smaller than the strength of what we felt together. He leaned in and wrapped me in his cloak, and for the first time I felt I didn't need to hide anything. My body relaxed, my hands found his, and our eyes connected in a way that no disguise or lie could destroy. "You have the choice, Hadria," Vaelor said. "You can accept freedom and wealth. You can leave, but I want you to stay." My heart raced. Freedom was before me, but staying meant fighting for what I believed in, for the protection of Elian and the people, and secretly, for the love that had blossomed between us. "I will stay," I replied, "but under my conditions. Elian will be protected, the poor will be respected, and no one else will suffer as we have suffered." He smiled, a smile full of reverence and acceptance. "I accept all your conditions, my silver wolf." In that instant, feeling the warmth of his body and the strength of his presence, I understood that our bond was complete. The black wolf and the silver wolf finally recognized each other, and the promise of a shared future stretched before us like a clear and illuminated road. Under the morning light, we promised not only love, but justice, protection, and hope for all who needed us. For the first time, I felt that my role in the world was not just to serve, but to lead, to love, and to protect with all the strength born of my own essence. 6 months had passed since the day the castle witnessed the silver light of my wolf, and the kingdom breathed differently, more justly and hopefully. Guards no longer stole, Omegas were valued, and Elian, my brother, now held the position of royal librarian. He laughed excitedly as he showed me books and maps that had once been denied to him, and my heart swelled with pride and gratitude. Vaelor walked by my side, his gaze always attentive, but full of tenderness. His presence had become my foundation, not only as king, but as the man who saw me and my people with respect and love. His every gesture, every whispered word, reminded me that we didn't need masks to be powerful. At the renewal ceremony, foreign dignitaries came to admire the legendary Silver Queen. My heart pounded as I ascended to the balcony. I saw the people gathered below, hopeful eyes turned toward us. "My people," I began, my voice firm and clear, loaded with emotion. "True strength is not in the blood that runs through our veins, but in the kindness we choose to practice, in the courage to protect those we love, even when no one sees." The silence was absolute, but not heavy. It was a silence of respect, of recognition, of renewed hope. I looked at Vaelor, and he held my hand firmly. In his blue gaze I saw love, pride, and a silent promise that we were in this journey together. Then I felt something new, a growing warmth inside me, and realized I was pregnant. My heart raced, and an involuntary smile appeared on my lips. Vaelor noticed immediately, and the emotion in his eyes was almost palpable. He leaned in and kissed my hand, his voice thick with contained tears. "A new life, Hadria, our legacy." In that moment I felt that all the suffering, the hunger, the humiliation, and the fear had been transformed into something more powerful: love, justice, and hope. My gaze returned to the people below, but my mind was only on Vaelor and the life growing inside me. "I thought I was saving a beggar with that piece of bread," I whispered to him, a sweet smile on my lips. "But I was saving the king, and he saved me back. My home is not this stone castle. It is the heart of the man who saw a queen when the world only saw a servant." Vaelor smiled, pulling me into a firm embrace, and there, under the full moon, surrounded by the people who now had hope, I felt the conclusion of our journey. It was not just the victory of a kingdom, but the victory of kindness, courage, and love that blossomed even in the deepest shadows. The legacy was formed, the Black Wolf and the Silver Wolf, united, guiding their people with justice, passion, and dignity, and the future, bright and silver, was beginning to be born. Thank you for being here and for joining me for another story. I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you want, leave your comment. I love reading what you feel and think after each episode. Thank you for the love, and see you in the next story.